They came right back on. Ooh.
Christine, can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you great. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Sanjeev, can you hear us?
Yes, Mayor.
Okay, so what I had said before we rebooted was, may I have a motion to approve resolution 22-182, and Richard motioned, and I asked for a second.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Wait, did we discuss this one?
We did, and you said it's the same thing.
This is just the
the-
inconsistency,
correct.
not the
Yeah, we didn't get to
overlay.
that, correct.
Thank you.
Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Prupus?
No.
Miss Deputy Mayor Thaw-Eglo?
No,
Mr. Vinayak?
Yes.
Mr. Wasserman?
Yes.
Mayor Miggins?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now we're on to ordinance 2605-22, which Mr. Vinayak is scheduled to sponsor.
I present for consideration on ordinance entitled ordinance number 2605-22. Ordinance amending and supplementing the Township of Melbourne Development Regulations and Zoning Ordinance. Tonight is a time set for the public hearing and final passage as advertised in accordance with law.
I declare the hearing open.
I'm going to explain why I think the density in this zone is either 15 or 16 units an acre. I'm going to go into a long, somewhat technical explanation for this, so I respectfully ask that you do not cut me off under the grounds that it is not relevant. So the analysis is that if we use the overlay densities in the current settlement agreement, you're satisfying 887 units of unmet need. If you change the densities around, which the court actually would allow you to do this if you bothered to read the decision, if you did 15 units an acre in all of the zones and 20 units an acre in OR1, you get 898 units. That's more than 887. The court then would have to ask Fair Share why the existing settlement agreement is constitutionally compliant, whereas the proposed is not constitutionally compliant. That would have to go to a trial all before the court takes our zoning away. Did Mr. Buzak explain this to you? Because I'm not a lawyer, but I can read words in the English language and I can understand them. You know, I tend not to misrepresent things. I've read the court opinion in Englewood Cliffs. A lot of people cry, Englewood Cliffs, they took away their zoning. Did you actually read what happened when they took away their zoning? Did you know how long it took for the zoning to be taken away? And how long, and actually what happened? I encourage you to actually read that before making these decisions. I encourage you to, if Mr. Buzak is unwilling to, I encourage you to find new legal counsel who could answer these questions. I think these are very important questions. Another proposal, you know, if I may, for CMO zone, if we put 16 units an acre there in all of the overlay zones and 25 units an acre, you get 894 units, which again is more than 887. It's better than our existing settlement agreement. It's more constitutionally compliant. And if you did those higher densities, you don't even need the dump project. Think about that for a second. How much is the dump project going to cost? I've presented you two plans here that are more constitutionally compliant. The burden will fall on Fair Share to explain this inconsistency. They won't be able to do it. They don't want it to go to trial. It's going to take at least 14 months for them to resolve this. And their stated goal is they want to build as many affordable homes as quickly as possible. Their stated goal is not they want to build as many affordable homes near train stations as possible. Think about that for a second. Think about when you say your hands are tied, you need to understand how a negotiation works. You need to go in there with a plan and go in there with a strategy. This is how it works. You go in there with these plans and you say, Fair Share, if you want things near the train station, lower the densities, lower the constitutional obligation. Does that make sense? Because if it doesn't, I'm happy to come up here in my remaining two to explain it all over again to you. Trust me, I've lost so much sleep over this issue. I've thought about it, okay? I think you ought to maybe lose some sleep over the issue. Maybe you should think about that for a second. I'll be back.
My name is Jeffrey Feld, 11 Alexander Lane, Short Hills, New Jersey. I just had to say on the record that I'm incorporating the comments I made before regarding ordinance 2006-04-22. So when the court looks at this, they can see that I stood up and objected to this ordinance. In addition, I just think maybe we should take a pause for two reasons.
Mr. Felt, this is ordinance 2605.
I know that,
Oh, okay.
26-05-22, I'm saying I'm incorporating the comments
Okay.
rather than go through
2605-22.
you know, the same kind of things. I think it's really incumbent because everyone's been fearful about the litigants' rights motion that was filed, that I think it's incumbent upon the township to tell us all the pieces that are required to get to the final compliance hearing. I've been making this request for the last 2 or 3 meetings. If you look at one of these schedules to the fair share special master's report for the fairness hearing, he had a schedule. I think that would help the conversation to find out how many pieces that we still have to make to get to that point. When the fire deputy business administrator was here, I used to tell him to read the legal notices. Today's newspaper is very important. You need to look at the inclusionary zoning ordinance that Newark is adopting. How many units, and also various projects that they're issuing long-term tax exemption balance. Look at the project that there is in today's notices where the Bear Stadium was. How many units are going there? I think it's like 4,000.
45.
You know, there's huge amounts. And I think what Mr. Footer has been saying before, we had to start looking about the regional absorption. How are all these units that are being built in Newark, East Orange, West Orange, Livingston, and in Milburn going to be filled up? And that's something that we really have to look at, because we're going to have a point where we're going to have all these units and no one's going to be there. And then how is the developer going to pay the taxes and things like this? Is a circular. I think it might take time to take a little pause. Take a pause till we know, you know, what is, or we're saying we had to rush to do something, but we don't, you haven't told the public all the pieces that we need to get the final compliance. And I've been asking this for at least 2 or 3 meetings in a row. And additionally, I think the public needs to know, has there been a proper notice of the final compliance hearing that the public knows, the people on this side of the table know when they have to submit something to the court to have the right to speak at that hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Felt.
Jay Morelli, #1 Claremont Drive in Short Hills. I just want to respond to one comment made about the rooftop decks, because I'm assuming rooftop decks apply to all these. I'll have more comments on the B2 zone ordinance. But the reason you want to put a regulation in against something in the zoning ordinance is not because it's going to prohibit it. Zoning ordinances do not prohibit things. They just mean that if somebody wants it, they have to apply for a variance. I learned this very hard in fighting some of the businesses that wanted to move it in near my property that were in direct conflict with the zoning ordinance. And the lawyers and the planners and the engineers that were brought in by the businesses were all saying, these are small variances. These are things that are normal. But because there was a regulation that said you couldn't do this, it gave us as residents the ability to go in and challenge it. Had we not gone in and challenged it, and had there not been an ordinance against it, we would have never won. Even the zoning board itself said, we would have approved this had you guys not come in and brought all these issues to us. So this is the reason that you want these ordinances to be in here. You want as many restrictions as possible to protect residents and give them the ability to protect themselves. If you say, if you don't put in rooftop decks are prohibited, and somebody builds something 50 feet, which is the setback ordinance from somebody's house, and you don't have an ordinance, then residents cannot challenge it, no matter what you say. So that's the reason you want to put it in here. If nobody challenges a variance, the variance gets approved. So don't be fearful about putting these ordinances in here that prohibit things, at least on paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morreale.
So we're discussing the CMO zone. That's the zone that is near the shop right.
Mhm.
So Diana indicated that Richard and Maggie didn't have our town's planner in the room during negotiations. So Maggie, since you were in the room, which one of you came up with the density for the zone? I'll take that silence as you not wanting to answer. So if you had a planner in the room, they might have pointed out that this zone might actually make sense to put some, emphasis on some, affordable housing because it's near a grocery store. After all, individuals in affordable units aren't going to go into downtown and be able to afford to pay for $20 poke bowls, $15 sandwiches, and $50 haircuts. All that said, as my husband indicated, there are better solutions that would actually reduce the zone's density. It's also interesting that Vinayak mentioned that we should complain to state officials like Cody. This seems to be a common refrain from Vinayak and Liggins anytime there's an issue they can't seem to handle. They said the same thing about car thefts before blaming residents for leaving their cars unlocked. It's my understanding that Maggie is pretty chummy with former Governor Cody. So perhaps Maggie, perhaps you could go to your friend Cody and ask him to put a good word in for us with the courts. Thanks.
Somebody on the phone.
Hi,
Good
Carrie
evening.
Russo, 514 Milburn Avenue, Short Hills. Resolution 22-182, ordinance 2605-22. The CMO zone.
Correct.
Near the ShopRite. So once again, since my questions weren't answered about the B3 and why it was overlooked and why I can't get any information, nobody will tell me why it was overlooked and not considered. And it's not in your ordinance for second consideration of adoption. In particular, the B3 zone known as Upper Milburn Avenue, what prohibits any property owner in a non-overlay zone from filing a builder's remedy lawsuit, claiming you have an exclusionary, equal protection, discriminatory zoning ordinance over the excluded district. Can anybody answer? Thank you.
Yeah, right. Thank you. Mr. Cosgrove. Good evening, Mr. Cosgrove.
Yes, are you folks able to hear me?
We can hear you just fine, sir.
Excellent. Thank you, folks. David Cosgrove, 99 Oakview. Chiming in a little bit what Jay Morreale said, and to perhaps explain to committee as Deputy Mayor Aglow and to Committee Woman Prupis about the rooftop deck ban. The reason that language needs to be in these ordinances, and it's not just this one, it's the subsequent ones you'll address tonight, is that when we were before the planning board on the Silverman matter, their planner claimed because of the, and I'm going to say sloppy use of the word amenities in the ordinance that was pushed through by the prior administration on Silverman, that they had an absolute right to not one, but to two rooftop party decks. Now, what bothered me about that at the time, and I thought I made it clear to the planning board to no avail really, because they still don't think there's a rooftop deck on it, even though there is, was that it annoyed me that a developer and their experts would take the position that they had an absolute right to it. So the language that's in these ordinances now does not prevent a rooftop deck. It just takes away the ability of a developer to argue that the word amenity gives them a right to not just a rooftop deck, but any imaginable amenity. Keep in mind that these experts, and I don't want to insult Graham, but there's a lot of experts out there that will say just about anything. And this protects the town to an extent from a developer saying an amenity and trying to include certain things in the amenity. It's not a perfect fix, by the way. You should all get ready, it's particularly those of you who are at the planning board or on the planning board, to arguments by developers that there's some other crazy amenity that you've never thought of and doesn't belong in a neighborhood. So I just want to emphasize, it doesn't stop a deck up by the Hilton. It just doesn't give them a right to it. So they have to come before the planning board and everyone gets to be heard about limitations and conditions, et cetera. Thank you all. And then one last thing. Committeewoman Prupis, you mentioned about the meeting you had earlier tonight, or all of you had earlier tonight with Mr. Buzak. And I would just throw out that the settlement agreement, there are signed settlement pages for the settlement agreement dated July 30th, signed by every developer. So if someone's telling you no one signed it on July 30th, you might want to take a look at those. They're on the town website. Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Mr. Cosgrove. Good evening, Ms. Morgan.
Hi, my
Good evening.
name is Stephanie Morgan, 49 Greenwood Drive, Milburn, New Jersey. With respect to the CMO zone, the only comment I really wanted to make is when I started to evaluate the settlement agreement and started thinking about shifting densities, the most obvious thing to me was to shift some of the density off Milburn Avenue into that CMO zone, which is, I think, currently only zoned for like 18 units an acre. And I thought that might be a way of taking some pressure off of the 40 units per acre development potential along Milburn Avenue. I believe that we would be able to do that as long as we are keeping the number of units that are required in the settlement agreement. However, I came to learn that the CMO zone floods, large parts of it flood. So that what I don't know is that even at 18 units per acre, would we actually end up having the number of units that we think we're going to have? And that it doesn't look to me like that's going to be a pressure release for the areas that are cited for 40 units per acre. But, as with Canoe Brook, and the CMO zone and potentially the Department of Public Works site, we have now identified sites that may or may not be able to support the units that we've proffered up for affordable housing. And I'm concerned about how that's going to, we may already have a settlement agreement that we will fail to meet. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Ms. Morgan. I think that's it for public comment.
I have a question, Mayor.
Yes,
Before
sir.
I go to this, Ms. Urso has asked a question about, I just want to get an understanding. Is she saying that if she or some other builders like to build in a different area, a bigger building, can she go in and do the builder's remedy lawsuit? Is that what her question was?
I think the question is, yes, exactly, is if perchance we have a signed settlement agreement. So since we have a signed, tell me if I'm wrong, Mr. Brewer, if we have a signed settlement agreement,
We have immunity.
Ms. Urso's B3 zone that she owns property and she could not come in and sue.
Right.
Right, and that's what the immunity is for, right?
One of the benefits of the settlement is that you get immunity from builders' remedy lawsuits. That's the purpose of it, that In the absence of it, if you were not in compliance with the affordable housing, the constitutional affordable housing obligation, builder's remedies can come and sue. Once you have a settlement with fair share that's approved by the court and you are in compliance with it, then you have immunity from suits, at least until 2025 in the next round.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So, Sanjeev, do you want to,
Yes, I move this.
Oh, wait, I have a
I'm-
couple comments.
oh, you do?
Yeah, of course. Of course, I have a couple comments.
We have to close it.
Oh, close it and then I'll,
So can you close it, Sanjeev, please? Go ahead,
I
Sanjeev.
move that this public hearing be closed and the ordinance be adopted on final reading, and that the township clerk be directed to publish the ordinance by title as passed on final reading in accordance with law.
Thank you.
Chairman,
Yes. now you
okay,
can.
so,
Go ahead, Di.
Mr. Feld, I have asked for pause twice. Jerry, I have lost a lot of sleep over this, a lot of sleep. Englewood Cliffs is not comparable because that was two developments. This is the township's entire zoning determined by, I don't know, still don't know how that happened. Jay Moriali, and Mr. Cosgrove, I understand what you're saying, but it should not be put in every single one of these ordinances because they're not the same. JFK is up in nowhere's land. Okay, we're gonna always disagree on that. And also again, CMO, to Ms. Morgan's point, it may flood, however, it's still less than half the density of Milburn Avenue. Putting all of this burden on 4 blocks that is in between South Mountain and the Wyoming section. And I can tell you another thing, these densities, and I don't know because I wasn't in the room again, are some of them so particularly low that they actually do not encourage development. So this now also guarantees when the developers come marching into town, they're gonna go right to that 4-block area next to Annie Says and overwhelm South Mountain section. And another thing people have to do, they talk about the schools without studies. If you eventually have 600 apartment buildings on Milburn Avenue, obviously South Mountain School and Wyoming School cannot handle that. So are we talking about potentially busing our children from Hartshorn to Deerfield, having a K-2 school, a 3 through 5? And I spoke to a woman who lives on the border of Milburn and Maplewood. She goes, well, that's okay. They do that in Maplewood. They have like little satellite schools. I said, yes, but you didn't move to Maplewood. You moved a block into Milburn. So the point is, all of these uneven zoning, where they're gonna wind up building, it's pretty clear. They want it downtown. They, being Fair Share Housing via Beth McManus, dictating to our 2 non-professional people here. It's just not good. So you know what my vote will be. Carry on.
Thank you, Ms. Dahl-Eglo. Anyone else have a comment? Okay, may I have a second, please?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Prupus?
No.
Ms. Deputy Mayor Thal-Eglo?
Okay, no.
Mr. Vinayak?
yes.
Mr. Wasserman?
Yes.
Mayor Megan?
Yes.
Thank you.
Why are we doing all of this tonight?
Yes, we are.
But like, didn't you used to say like, Tara, the meetings are going too long, the meetings are going too long?
Well,
You
we're
just didn't take
pushing
that
through.
advice. This is ridiculous.
Resolution
And it's now
22-183,
11:31.
setting forth reasons for the Township Committee's adoption of ordinance 2606-22 as required under NJSA 40-55D-62A. Are there any comments from the committee in regards to resolution 22-183?
Same comment. Inconsistent, voted unanimously by the planning board.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any comments? May I have a motion to approve resolution 22-183?
Motion.
May I have a second?
Second,
Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Prupus?
No.
Deputy Mayor Thal-Eglo?
No.
Mr. Vinayak?
yes.
Mr. Wasserman?
Yes.
Mayor Megan?
Yes.
Thank you.
You need to go back. Mr. Vinayak needs to cast his vote again.
He said here.
Correct.
Mr. Vinayak?
Yes.
He's not agree.
Just his? Christine, do you have to call it again or just Mr. Vinayak's?
The committee prefer I call again?
Yes, call it again, please.
Ms. Prupus?
No.
Deputy Mayor Thal Eglo,
No.
Mr. Vinayak,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserman,
Yes.
Mayor Miggins.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for catching that. Ordinance 2606-22. Mr. Wasserman, you are scheduled to
Ordinance-
sponsor this.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Ordinance number 2606-22, ordinance amending and supplementing the Township of Milburn Development Regulations and Zoning Ordinance. Tonight is the time set for public hearing and final passage as advertised in accordance with the law. I declare the hearing open.
So this is the B2 zone, which is near South Mountain. So it's going to have a significant impact on its residents. I've had the chance to get to know a number of South Mountain residents recently. They're a close-knit community, and what you are trying to do to them with these densities is unjust and unfair. Burdening them with 40 units an acre, in addition to the high density of the 69 unit an acre Annie Says project, is wrong. This will disproportionately impact their elementary school and their neighborhoods. This zone is also close to the train and close to downtown, so I have every reason to believe that it will be fully built out. Last week, Maggie and Richard held an info session for South Mountain residents at a private home. I was invited by the homeowner to attend, and when I showed up, Maggie refused to continue talking with the residents unless I left. Maggie, what were you afraid of? Shouldn't information be shared with all residents? Had Maggie let me attend the meeting, I would have had the opportunity to explain that there are better and more fair ways to meet our constitutional obligation. Instead, my husband and I had to release a video on YouTube to try to get the message out that there were more equitable alternatives that should be considered. Maggie, I understand you didn't watch the video, so I highly recommend that you do, as it is a great example of how an analytical approach can help provide superior solutions. The video is also as evidence that residents can play an active role in providing thoughtful solutions to a problem the town is facing when they're given the opportunity to participate. You can fire Buzak and McManus and ask the court for more time to make a better plan. You owe it to the town to at least try. Don't keep standing there, or sitting rather, and saying your hands are tied. My husband and I have found a number of cases where other towns have renegotiated their settlements. To say that it is impossible is disingenuous. Wasserman, Miggins, and McManus made a bad deal. And now the Gang of Three continues to perpetuate the myth that they did the best they could, and they continue to push these terrible zoning ordinances forward, even after it has been made abundantly clear that they got a bad deal. Shame on you.
Thank you.
I'm going to go through the same argument again because it seems it didn't take the first time. So let's try this again. We're talking about B2 zone, which the ordinance has split into A, B, and C. So B2, I like to call them B2 Morris and B2 Milburn. So B2 Morris has 18 units an acre. B2 Milburn has 40 units an acre in the ordinance. Again, I think these should be either 15 units an acre or 16 units an acre, depending on whether or not you want the dump project. Do I have to explain my legal reasoning again? Perhaps I should. So when I spoke about the Englewood Cliffs decision, this came out last week, by the way. If you read the decision, it says, although the Sylvan Settlement Agreement involved specific property, the impact of the agreement was to satisfy the borough's overall obligation to allow affordable housing. That obligation is not site-specific. Rather, that obligation is borough-wide. So from the court's perspective, if an affordable unit is built in B2 Milburn, or if it's built in B2 Morris, or if it's built in Canoebrook, they view it as the same. You're satisfying the same amount of constitutional obligation. So I don't know how many times I have to say this before it'll take. Perhaps it's already taken. If it has already taken, then I can only conclude that you actually want 40 units an acre. Will you answer that question? Do you want 40 units an acre, Maggie Miggins? No, you're never going to answer that question. So all we can say is the actions speak louder than the words. All of the residents here tonight and on the Zoom are seeing that Maggie Miggins, Richard Wasserman, Sanjeev Vinayak continue to disregard the proposals that we've put forth. Why won't you consider them? I think the answer is clear now. It's because you want 40 units an acre there. I don't know if you think that's just a good idea, or if someone's promised you something for putting 40 units an acre, We'll never know. But it doesn't matter because you'll spin whatever words you want. The only thing that matters is that you're voting this ordinance into existence, and it's going to be the law. You're going to affect so many people's lives. So many people have bought property in South Mountain hoping to enjoy the character that they bought into. And now you're just tearing it apart. You're ripping it up. You're building monstrosities, literally across the street from where they live. Think about that for a second. To what end? Why won't you even listen to us? Again, it could be 15 or 16 units an acre, yet you insist on 18 in Morris and 40 in Milburn. Why won't you answer the question? Why do you consistently vote the way you do? Where is the accountability? If there's no accountability, I'm going to tell all of the residents here tonight that there should be a recall initiated. You should be removed from office.
Just give me a second. Again, Jeffrey Feld, 11 Alexander Lane, Short Hills, New Jersey. For purposes of ordinance 2606-22, I adopt and integrate all my other comments regarding the two other prior overlay ordinances that we considered. However, I just want to add a couple more factors. We've been hearing about the Englewood Cliffs settlement. There's another binding presidential opinion that came out in the last 4 months. It's in Ray Bordentown. I recommend that everyone reads that case because it talks about a settlement. And this goes back to the constitutional right, especially when we talk about this B2 zone that you have subdivided into 3 new sections without any input or comment or notice to the public. That's a constitutional issue. I go back to Justice Alvin's decision 2 weeks ago. When I say this, we should not be just looking at a vacuum of what's happening in Milburn. These fights are occurring throughout the state. In Jersey City and in certain neighborhood, I think it's called the Heights, the citizens are opposing to changing the zoning ordinances to make a 15-minute community, which is the same concept of the transit village. Finally, we've been hearing about the impact of the schools. One of the gifts that we got my wife for her birthday is the former principal from Milburn Middle School, Cahill's memoirs of being the principal of the school. My wife read me a couple paragraphs from that book last night, where he talked about that people were moving into the community that didn't have the resources of most other peoples, and the additional staff that he had to hire for remedial work. I think we need to take a time out because we heard those comments about 3 hours ago from many of the citizens. You have the former principal of our middle school telling you about the social dilemma that you're going to front. This is a book that's come out in the last 6 months. I recommend that everyone read it because these are the issues that we're talking about. It will become part of the court record. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Mark Webb here from 26 South Mountain Road. So I moved into, and my family moved into, South Mountain in 2020 for a lot of the reasons that were mentioned already for the good schools. And, we had no idea until 3 weeks ago that, there could be so many units with so much pressure on our schools. And, I think that Wyoming people maybe don't even realize that, this could also massively impact their schools as well. I'd like to know, what you intend to do to sort of reduce the pressure on those schools. And, it's not encouraging. I know when you came to our meeting, you said, Mr. Wasserman, that in the past, the approach has been just to bring in trailers and teach our kids out of trailers. And that doesn't sound like a great plan to me, especially since, you've had a year to think about it already. And I guess we all expected tonight that, we'd make these points and they would be voted against no matter what. We've heard a lot of, roll call votes, please. So tonight, I'm listening to what you're saying. I just want to ask everyone here, recall vote, please. What do you think? Okay. It's good to take a little bit of power back.
Mentioned recall. I looked into recalling some of you folks, and it's a little bit more difficult as far as the petitions. You have to get 25%, and you have to, I know how to recall, because when it comes to recalling and all you wonderful people, I've got my Robert's Rules of Order, and I know how to recall people. You can't be recalled very easily, and that's it. And I want to recall you folks, okay? So recall's not gonna work.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay, but if you could be, I'll show you folks how to recall people very nicely. Sorry about that. Because that's what I do. I recall. But I originally I was coming here tonight talking about the other issues, and this falls into the problem of, I call about inspection reports, because I live in an apartment, and there will be more apartments, and I called in the State of New Jersey Department of Community Affairs. You've heard of it. And because if there's a problem, so they came out, and I called them, and they, hey, 26 violations. Okay, and then they came back, 37 more violations, then 8 more violations. And then I called the fire department here, Fire Inspector Dave, great guy, Starzinski, he's fabulous. And all of a sudden, hey, some more violations. And all of a sudden, things started to get fixed. But the issue is, you have apartment buildings. You have to have people to take care of making sure that they stay together, that you don't have like violations. Okay, so I have 36 here, 37, 26 and 8, and you have violations. Who is going to make sure that everything is taken care of? I'm not talking about only police. What are we talking about? Inspectors to make sure things get done. How many units? Who has decided all this? I'm not that smart a guy. Really. I never, I didn't go to any graduate schools or any of that kind of stuff. I graduated last, absolutely positively last in my college. Absolutely last. But is it, yeah, but I wanted to learn and speak and go different places to meet people, to find out. When you listen to the people, you find things out. So I read books. Who else would say, hey, there's a fascist? Okay, so who was his name? Yeah, Francisco Franco. Yeah, that little guy. I had to go see Francisco Franco. I'm an idiot. Okay, when he was still alive. So you go to the Ganges, you go to Kathmandu, you go wherever. But the point I'm trying to make is you have to listen to the people, I believe. Not that smart, but please read and go to the library.
Thank you, Mr. Carlin. Thank you, Mr. Carlin.
Maybe won't recall me.
I think you're safe.
Hi, Jay Morielli, number 1 Claremont Drive in Short Hills. And for informational purposes, our property borders a B2 overlay zone. And in fact, the back of my house to the border of the B2 zone is approximately the distance from this podium to that wall. So the overlay zone is very, very important to me. In the ordinance, under permitted principal uses, there have been 2 lines that have been added. And I've spoken with a couple of members of the TC, and I've written a letter. My wife and I wrote a letter to the TC on this. The first line permits multifamily housing development, line 12. Obviously part of the settlement, obviously part of what Fair Share Housing is trying to do, part of the constitutional obligation. But line 13 is any combination of the permitted principal uses, which means you can have 1 or 2 stories of business with apartments on top that far away from the back of a single-family home. Now, to my understanding, there's nothing in the Constitution that requires that there be mixed residential, commercial housing. There's nothing in the settlement that says there needs to be mixed residential, commercial buildings. So this is something that you in the committee, along with Graham and Alex, have decided to add. Now, why am I against mixed? Well, if you've got 18 units and it's not mixed, that'll give you 2 floors. If, however, you want to put some commercial in there, that's going to push it up to 3 floors. And maybe somebody will even apply for a variance to get a 4th floor so they can have 2 stories. Because again, people go in, they ask for variances. If nobody complains, they get their variance. So my question, and by the way, if you go down Morris Avenue, go down east on Morris, you'll see the Baltusrol Apartments, 100% residential, a quarter mile down from the B2 East. If you go west on Morris, you can see the Short Hill Terrace Apartment, 100% residential. So my question is, why are you town committee members bent on putting in mixed residential, commercial, 20 feet behind the back of my house and my neighbor's houses? This is your choice. This isn't the settlement. This isn't the Constitution. This is your decision. So I ask the 3 of you that are going to vote yes for this, explain to me why it is more important to have mixed commercial residential than either 100% commercial or 100% residential. Why you think it's important to have both. And it's not in the settlement. This is your decision, your choice. You can't blame this on COA. You can't blame this on Beth McManus. You can't blame this. Well, maybe you can blame this on Buzak. Nobody knows what went on in that room. This is your vote. This is your vote. Before you vote yes, which I know you're going to vote yes, tell me why line 13 is so important to you when I guarantee you all the residents that live along that borderline will tell you they would prefer either 100% commercial or 100% residential. Before you vote, please answer that one question. And I've written to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moriarty.
I'd just like to support Jay in his request. It's pretty basic stuff. He's been a gentleman. He's supported things that this township committee has asked to be done. He's been one of the vocal supporters of quite a few things. I can't imagine why he can't get an answer to that question. Is it because Miss Megan stands to make some money off her real estate business selling houses along there like you did on Meadowbrook? Yep. Not telling people what was happening and selling them houses? Perhaps. Just wondering. The other question I have is the issue that was brought up about B3, which you answered and said, sir, that you a property owner could not bring a builder's remedy lawsuit, but you didn't address the question that Ms. Urso brought up regarding discrimination against people who may own property in that B3. You didn't address that. So if are you willing to put your opinion that you aired tonight in writing that addressed her question and that Mr. Feld also raised? Thank you.
I understand what she was asking about Perry Urso's question. It's not just about immunity. It was that just excluding people in the B3.
Would that be the basis for
A lawsuit saying we were
a builder's remedy
excluded.
lawsuit?
So we were excluded from the settlement
And we want to build.
and we want to build, right? I think that's what she was saying.
Hello, my name is Bako Faizi, number 10 South Mountain Road. I live right across from B2, probably 100 yards away. I came here tonight with an open mind, just to listen to the arguments. There were a lot of detailed argument against the plan here, but I attended some of the private meetings with you, Mayor Meggins, with Mr. Wasserman, with Ms. Eklo, and I didn't have a meeting with Ms. Probus. But so far, I haven't heard a detailed, reasonable argument why these gentlemen are wrong and why you accepted the proposal by Fair Share Housing. Besides that, there's a constitutional right. Everybody knows that. There is no argument against that. And also that our hands were tied. They had done their homework very well. We didn't do our homework very well. We went to that meeting and it was imposed on us. I think you own the township and good explanation of why are you devastating our neighborhood?
Good evening. Perry Urso, 514 Milburn Avenue in Short Hills. I've been listening for hours and I can't even stress how many members of the public have commented about the schools and the impact on the schools. That was one of my questions during several meetings about having studies, and no one has gone and had spoken to the Board of Ed. We don't have an opinion for the Board of Ed. So I ask, how many sitting members still have children utilizing our schools? I just want to make sure. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yep.
Okay. It's just because it goes black. I can't see. And I believe it's just Mr. Vignac. And so everyone else that sits on this board have already utilized the school system. So they're not going to be, and their children will not be impacted. I think you seriously are taking this way too mildly. And as parents, you should be thinking of the children. I would also like to go to Mayor Miggins. I appreciate you getting advice from your attorney, but when will you answer the question why B3 was excluded from your overlays? That we've gotten so far 3-2 yays on the prior ordinances. So based on the 2606-22, I will continue to ask regarding this resolution and the ordinance we're reading. We have, oh wait, forgive me, I'm sorry. I'm like all over the place. I have all these notes. In particular regarding the B3 zones, known as the Upper Milburn Avenue, that prohibits any property owner, I'm speaking as a whole because there's multiple property owners here. I'm not singling anybody out. In a non-overlay zone from filing a builder's remedy lawsuit, claiming you have exclusionary, equal protection, discriminatory zoning ordinance over an excluded district. I would ask you, Ms. Mayor Miggins, if you would ask your attorney to put his opinion that he said on the prior ordinance 2605-22, to put his opinion, what you asked about what I'm saying in writing. Thank you.
Thank you. You may.
The words that have been used to articulate the question on whether or not certain property owners could have and file a builder's remedy lawsuit has changed. And I understand that that's just what happens when you're talking contemporaneously. If you have a question about whether or not certain actions would allow for a builder's remedy lawsuit, that seems to be a hypothetical, one opinion. But if you put it in writing and it's concrete, our office would, to the extent that the governing body or the mayor would like an answer to that question, we can. But again, it's been articulated several different ways. It's not in writing, things move. So I've given a general answer that because you have mentioned, could they file a builder's remedy lawsuit? Builder's remedy lawsuit is specific to affordable housing when it's not a discriminatory So you don't file a builder's remedy lawsuit because of a claim of discrimination. You file it because it is a remedy that builders had to bring a municipality into compliance with the constitutional obligation to provide affordable housing. So I don't want to get mixed the phrases builder's remedy and discrimination on a property owner. Those are two separate things. Lawsuits could have both ways, but a builder's remedy is very specific to affordable housing. And if the court gives you a determination and confirms that the settlement brings the municipality into compliance with its affordable housing obligation, the municipality would have immunity from a builder's remedy lawsuit seeking to change the zoning.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else, Jess? We have somebody in the, Mr. Siebert, Mr. Siebert, Mr. Siebert.
Oh, no.
We have somebody, just give it a minute, please, because we brought Miss Morgan on before you said you wanted to ask something, but stay right there.
I'll wait if it's more convenient.
Oh, go ahead, Miss Morgan, you're on, because there's no one behind you yet.
This is actually more in the form of a question than a statement, but I think it would help me and maybe some of us in the room get our heads a little bit around what other constraints there are. When we talk about dense, I tuned into the planning board hearing. And in that hearing, things were discussed, let's say with respect specifically to B2C, things were discussed having to do with having more than a 20-foot setback off Milburn Avenue, dealing with stormwater, should there be something about a parking deck so that there'd be more green space and more ability to handle stormwater and other design and engineering issues were discussed at the planning board level. When I look at the third round draft, I see, most of the conversation is about density and what's around the overlay districts and so on. I guess my question, I guess it's to council, is we're talking about the density, but does the public have the opportunity when a developer actually comes in and files an application for the development of land that is permitted in the overlay district to have 4 units per acre? Can design criterion be imposed at the planning board level that would affect the actual unit count that could be constructed? By way of example, if we now said it has to be 40 feet off the road instead of 20, and it pushes it back further to the railroad, and then there has to be a parking deck because surface parking is going to create, let's say, stormwater issues for South Mountain. Could it actually turn out that what can actually be produced on that length of land be less once the appropriate engineering and design and other planning board criterion are properly imposed on the development so that it's actually a sensible development? Or I guess it's really a question, but it's certainly germane because we keep assuming that once it's 40 an acre, it's going to be 40 an acre and we can stand on our heads and it won't be any different. My question is, once you actually get into the details, is it conceivable that 40 units per acre will not be possible once appropriate standards through the planning board are placed on the development?
I'll answer it. It's kind of a general hypothetical, so I'll answer it kind of generally. The settlement, as you've heard discussed, provides a reasonable opportunity for X amount of units per acre in certain zones. It would be a violation of that settlement to then impose regulations that would make that impossible. So you can't get around the settlement agreeing to allow X amount of units by then making the standard such that it can never be accomplished. It's a general answer to the general question, but no, you wouldn't be able to do that.
Well, hold it. I mean, 20% is the minimum, but I guess what I'm asking is that if the number of units ends up being reduced in order to make it a sensible development, by way of example, pushing it 40 feet off the street instead of looming, 20 feet off Milburn Avenue, we're required to have at least 20% of the units be affordable. But if fewer units are produced, then what would happen is the affordable units would simply be a higher percentage of the overall development. I'm not suggesting that we reduce.
No, that wouldn't
What's
happen. That wouldn't happen. It's still going to be 20%. And there are we're also introducing a buffer zone ordinance this evening as well. There's, and Mr. Peto's on the line if you want him to specifically speak to this ordinance, because that's what we are talking about, is this ordinance in the B2 district.
Well, but as long as we keep the number of units that we've agreed to in the way of affordable housing, what we produce in the way of market housing is completely irrelevant. So if in order to meet, for example, a DPW site, we're producing, the whole thing is going to be 75 units in order to help us catch up more quickly. Why would it be any concern for the fair share plan if the right number of fair share plan units that we had anticipated would be produced by developing 40 units per acre? If we develop less, but we still held the count of affordable units at the same number.
Who's gonna build them?
Right.
There's
Nobody's
no
gonna build it.
developer that's gonna
Ms.
build
Morgan,
them.
nobody's going to build that.
For the money.
Yeah.
Can we keep-
If I could just respond real quick, that's the whole principle of having 20% is that there's an economic incentive for developers to come and build X amount of units and make 20% affordable. They have less of an economic incentive to go and build 100 units if 45% have to be affordable. So that's really what it is. The 100% affordable, the municipality is involved in that one. So it's going to make sure it gets done. But the other ones, they're market driven. It's an incentive for developers to come.
One last question, Graham. Graham, can you speak to Mr. Morreale why they put commercial on the opportunity of commercial on the Morris Avenue B2 zone, please?
The question
Yes,
is, why
sir.
are you gonna vote for it? I don't wanna hear why Graham thinks
Oh.
it or why Alex, but why are you gonna vote for it?
Because we're voting for it.
Yeah.
We're voting for it
Well, why?
Matches.
because we are, because we have to get it done. We're voting for
But
it.
you can strike line 13. You can strike line 13 and still vote for it.
No,
No.
you may not.
Ordinance for you.
Nope.
If
Okay.
it's been introduced once, you.
Okay,
Yeah.
watch it.
You'd have to go back
Now
to
it's
the
Mr.
beginning.
Siebert's turn. Go ahead, Mr. Siebert.
So Richard Seibert, Milburn, okay.
Southern Slope.
Sat in a lot of meetings in my life. I've heard a lot of people duck questions. Perry Urso, same question over and over, B3. Council has stepped up now and answered a few questions. Seems like you know a lot of stuff. Why no B3? Sanjeev, you're a smart guy, man. You can talk in circles all night. Why no B3?
Mr. Seibert.
No, I'm being serious now. Why no B3? Who's gonna answer that? I'm not leaving here.
Mr.
until somebody
Petto,
answers it.
Would
Who's
you
gonna
answer that for Mr. Seibert?
He doesn't know.
He was not here.
He wasn't here.
Drag it out too much.
Why no B3?
Okay,
That's
okay,
Mr. Wasserman, you know why no B3?
okay, we'll commit to the ordinance. Okay.
Do you know why?
That was part of the settlement.
So the fair
No.
share housing said no B3.
Mr. Petto, would you please answer this question for me? Would you, excuse me, excuse me.
No, excuse me.
Mr. Feld, I'm speaking.
I mean, Perry.
If I may finish.
Perry is owed the answer.
She is, and if I may finish. Mr. Petto, will you speak to the master plan of 2018 and the ordinances and the overlay zones that were picked in the master plan of 2018? And what was said in the master plan of 2018 in regards to the B3 district?
Sure, certainly. So in
Thank
the
you.
2018 housing element and fair share plan that's been adopted by the planning board, the identified zones to include for overlay density inclusion were the C zone, the Canoeber Country Club, the B2 zone along Morris Turnpike, the B2 zone along Milburn Avenue, and the CMO zone were identified for density incorporation. So that's, I can speak to that with respect to history as far as identifying zones through the housing element process where density may be incorporated to satisfy the affordable housing obligation.
Okay, thank you. So wait a second, hold a second. So therefore, who decided those zones?
The planning board of 2018, when they did
But
the.
we don't listen to our planning board. Now we're gonna listen to our planning.
Ms. Ziegler was sitting on the planning board when we did.
All these
Whoa,
times, yeah,
whoa,
don't focus on
whoa.
Diane, Maggie.
Yes.
Don't, stop.
Let me tell you,
Spinning
wait,
this.
no,
But that happens to be true.
That's
You were on
the
that
truth.
planning.
Okay,
The planning board of
You're on the planning
2018
board.
let me say something.
chose those.
Mr.
chose those.
Wasserman,
What?
yeah, Maggie, bang it.
Yeah.
We
No,
never listen to the
if we
planning
are
board, we
going
listen now.
To look at the zone,
Well,
look at
that's the question. That's
2018,
where it came
then
from.
No,
let's
it's
use
not.
the overlay densities from 2018.
Yeah.
That was a starting.
Why didn't you
Council.
even
What they
distribute
said
it?
was that was a starting, that was a starting number for the overlay zones for density.
That's right.
Uh-huh.
And in the, if you read the master plan, it does say where the B3 zones are concerned that the lot coverages are not big enough, that they're only 100 deep. That's in the master
They're
plan that
shallow.
I
They're
read.
shallow.
They're shallow. That's what I read. It's in our master plan from 2018. There's 173 pages, I think it is. That's what's in the master plan. And that's
I don't
why,
understand. because
that's why
I feel
B3.
bad for Perry. She
That's
keeps
what-
asking that question.
But that's why B3 wasn't picked, was because the shallowness of, and it's written right in our master plan.
Yeah.
It's there. You can look it up. It's there.
But we're
So
not
that's
listening
why
to our
B3
planning board when they say it's not, these ordinances are not inconsistent or inconsistent with the planning board. So you want to play it both ways.
I'm not playing it
that
both
cover
ways.
your
I'm
ass.
just making, the gentleman
Yes.
asked when.
You're covering
have
it
we-
both ways.
No, that's not true.
Yeah. We'll listen to the planning board here, but we won't listen here.
And we'll listen to the master plan here, we'll listen to the master plan there. Maggie
Let's
and
close.
Richard,
Okay.
you were able to, and this
Let's
is your
close.
quote, no, I have comments. You were able to keep and protect your little turfdom back then.
It wasn't protected.
Right.
It wasn't protected.
Right.
It wasn't
Okay,
protected.
is public hearing closed? I have some comments.
Public
I'm-
hearing is closed.
I move that this public hearing be closed and the ordinance be adopted on final reading, and the township clerk be directed to publish the ordinance by title as passed on the final reading in accordance with the law. I have. And that's for a second. Or-
Comments?
Yes,
All right, yeah.
Mr. Carlin, you made some excellent points. Will we need a massive increase of personnel? Fire, police, and now inspection. Okay, we only have 1.5 inspector. We had to add a half man. Maggie, you had said it in one of the planning board meetings, it's all equal, Diane, because you have 30 acres on Morris Avenue at 18 units. And you got 14 units on Milburn Avenue at 40 units per acre. So you're all gonna get 550 units, except theirs is on 30 acres and ours is on 40 acres. And then 15, okay, it's not at all equal. The profits are not gonna be there to build on 18 units per acre on Morris Avenue. So I don't even need to worry about Mr. Morelli. They're gonna put all of this on Milburn Avenue, because what's gonna happen in 2025, when we owe more acreage, they're gonna say, well, Annie says got 69 units per acre. I don't want just 40, I want 69. So you're talking about this burden is all going down on Milburn Avenue on a 4-block area. And I'm not gonna go as far as say there's retribution on South Mountain, because I'm blamed for what happened at Silverman. And I don't know if this is why you ran for office, Maggie, but it all's a little too questionable to me. I wish it wasn't so late. I wish all of South Mountain, I wish this was the only thing on the agenda. And we'd have 200 people from South Mountain, like we had 200 from Glenwood to protect that Silverman property. But this is all the entire town, and it's all about, I think you just said it before. I think you said this, Andy, it's about the fair share housing and the developer's incentive. That's all you need to know, folks. The fair share housing, the developer's incentive, Beth McManus for sufficient housing, Ed Buzek, it's all too convoluted. And at the end of the day, fair share housing, as I said before, is ecstatic and Milburn is furious. And we're gonna go through this for the next couple of, I don't know how much longer.
Go ahead, Andy. Mr. Brewer.
I just want to clarify one thing. It wasn't the same as fair share housing. It was the the obligation to produce affordable housing, which the court imposes. And the way that is enacted is through a settlement with fair share housing.
Incentivizing developers, you said it.
No, two things here. You said that it was fair share housing. I was not saying that in any way this is because of fair share housing or they dictate it. It was a negotiation back and forth. The reason for the incentive, that was a specific question on whether or not you could simply change the standards so that you couldn't produce all of the units, but you just have 45% affordable units on it in a particular area. And that specific question is when I talked about incentive. That's why it's 20%, not the entire place. It's not incentives for developers. It's whether or not the 20% is necessary, because when you bump it up with standards and you change it so you can't actually produce those units, they would never get built and the court wouldn't approve that. That's the
So
reason.
it does incentivize developers, and because people kept bringing up B3, we have now jumping from B2, which also split into 3 zones. So done by Ms. McManus, I assume, and now we're jumping right to B4. So B3 is not in there for whatever reasons. It's just not in there, but we do know that Ms. Miggins and Mr. Wasserman were very protective of their neighborhood where they live, and Ms. Miggins has her profitable real estate office. You get great advertisement from this, Maggie.
I don't want to.
Amazing advertising.
And I don't live there. I live up and around the corner.
Yeah.
I don't live there.
What zone is Benny Henderson?
B2. I back up to the railroad tracks. That's what I do. My house backs up to the railroad tracks, just so you know. I back up to the
But your
railroad
office
tracks.
is there.
It doesn't matter. Where do I live? I live at 34 South Terrace and I back up to the railroad tracks.
Your office is there. Okay, I'm done.
Okay. I have a second, please, to move this.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Prupus,
No.
Deputy Mayor Phil Eglo,
No.
Mr. Vinayak,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserman,
Yes.
Mayor Miggins.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, where are we at this? Resolution 22-184, setting forth reasons for the Township's Committee's adoption of Ordinance 2607-22 as required under NJSA 40-55D-62A. Are there any comments from the committee in regards to Resolution 22-184?
Again, unanimously voted inconsistent by our planning board.
Okay. Any other comments?
We should listen to our planning board.
Okay. May I have a motion to approve Resolution 22-184?
Motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Prupus,
No.
Deputy Mayor Phil Eglo,
No.
Mr. Vinayak,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserman,
Yes.
Mayor Miggins.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm scheduled to sponsor procedure for passing an ordinance on final reading. I present for consideration an ordinance entitled Ordinance Number 2607-22, an ordinance amending and supplementing the Township of Millburn Development Regulations and Zoning Ordinance. Tonight is the time to set for the public hearing and final passage as advertised in accordance with law. I declare the hearing open.
I'm back. All right, this one's gonna be a little different, so hopefully it wakes you up a bit. It's interesting, we're talking about the B4 zone, and Graham, you seem like a really nice person, and I feel really bad that you've been roped into this. Turns out the 2018 Fair Share Housing Element and Fair Share Plan doesn't include B4. So your rationale for not including B3, well, B4 is not included, so why are we including it now? Oops. Again, there's something interesting, and because I won't get to speak on the introduction, and because this whole issue is all encompassing, I hope you won't interrupt me. The C zone for Canoe Brook, there's a first introduction again for the ordinance that wasn't introduced last time because Maggie Miggins recused herself for reasons because I believe she's a member or her husband's a member. Let's just think about this from a strategic point of view. If we're all so concerned that we're not going to be in compliance with the settlement agreement because the C zone's not going to be passed, why don't we take a step back and figure out how we can get Tara and Diane back to the table so we can actually fulfill the settlement agreement? Because if C doesn't pass, Fair Share is going to be Milburn, you're not in compliance with the settlement agreement. We're going to come take over your zoning, which they probably won't because it's going to take a long time for that trial to happen. Okay, so why don't we just take a step back? You know what's going to happen. That Canoe Brook ordinance is not going to be introduced. It's going to be 2-2. Miggins is going to recuse herself. Oh, and by the way, if you decide not to recuse yourself, there's court precedent in the Englewood Cliffs decision. Did anyone bother to read that? So Maggie, if you, there's a disgusting bug right here. I'm sorry. So Maggie, I don't know what your plans are for this ordinance related to Canoe Brook. If you don't recuse yourself this time, the court's going to find that that's invalid because of what happened in Englewood Cliffs conveniently. So why don't we take a step back? We want to satisfy the settlement agreement. In order for the court to take over our zoning, they need to find us to be acting in bad faith. We need to be finding I think it's a concerted, let me find you the exact, a concerted effort to avoid compliance. All of these residents, I've given you a solution how to be even more compliant that I think Tara and Diane would agree with. And then we don't have to potentially be in default of our settlement agreement because of some recusal technicality. Why don't you think about that for a second? Because really, I can't for the life of me understand why you wouldn't do this. Really, I just can't. And B4, okay, I'm gonna go back. Okay, B4 is 25 units an acre. It could be 15 units an acre. It could be 16 units an acre. Why don't you consider it? Because at the end of the day, then I think we could get Tara and Diane to sign on to all of the settlement agreements, at least to go back to fair share housing or something. But the way it's turning out, you've backed yourself into a corner. We're giving you the opportunity to fix it. So I'm curious to see how you're going to get out of this one.
B4, downtown zone. Where are the traffic studies? Where are the safety studies? Downtown Milburn is already hard enough to get around, especially in the summer, because you guys saw fit to just close some of the roads. Putting high density housing in this area is only going to make matters worse. I also want to take a moment to thank Tara and Diane for waking up and admitting they made a mistake when they originally voted to approve the Fair Share Housing Settlement Agreement. That takes courage, and we as residents appreciate that. For the rest of this committee, I am very disappointed. You are clearly not acting in the best interest of the residents, and you're not listening to us. Wasserman, you're not running for re-election. You're a lame duck, so I don't know why you keep voting with the gang of three. What have you been promised in exchange for voting for these ordinances? What is the political machine holding over you? Miggins and Vinayak, I encourage you to both resign before residents of this town recall you. Based on my conversation with residents throughout the town, not just the ones in this room, recall is quite honestly the next step that many of these residents will undertake. It will surely be a stain on your legacy and may throw a wet blanket on your future political ambitions. Maggie and Sanjeev, if you enjoy being township committee members, then I strongly encourage you to think long and hard before you keep voting in a manner that is inconsistent with the residents' wishes and the best interests of the town. It's only a matter of time before the residents rise up and take collective action. You should also know that there are groups of residents that are considering taking legal action directly against you as individual committee members. Miggins, Vinayak, and Wasserman, you have clearly breached your fiduciary duty, and if a court agrees, then the township won't be able to cover your legal fees. This could potentially result in financial ruin for you. If you don't already have personal liability insurance, I highly recommend you get it now. The residents are activated, and they are angry. This is a town of highly intelligent and effective individuals with vast resources.
Sir, we're
If they want to
discussing the
recall you
B4
or
ordinance.
sue you,
We're discussing the B4 ordinance here. I'm just letting you know that.
I'm going to
You-
finish my last sentence, so I'm going to
It's
do that.
B4 though, okay, just so
Yeah,
we're aware of
okay.
what we're talking about here.
If the residents want to recall you or sue you, then you can be certain that they're going to get it done. We're a town of doers, and you're doing a terrible job.
Thank you.
Ship up,
Thank you.
shape up or ship out.
Thank you. Thank you.
I feel sorry for you guys. You started your day at 6 o'clock tonight? We're now 6 hours and 20 minutes to go, and there's more to come. I am a doer. My name is Jeff Feld, 11 Alexander Lane. I have sued you personally, and we found out today you paid your deductible to a law firm that you never retained. So I don't know what criminal activity you just.
Before,
admitted to tonight.
before, Mr. Feld, the before.
Well, I just think we have to go back to before, and I want to make sure that we all fully understand the exit ramp that was just explained to you. I've been offering you exit ramps since September 2020, which you refused. You said before you couldn't do the B3 because of the master plan and the fair share plan of 2018. Well, B4 was never there. And I'm still trying to figure out, unless it's magic, and people walk in, that there still is a constitutional democracy. How did you create an overlay without any input from the public? That goes back to someone said before in a Zoom about 4 or 5 hours, the bedrock principle of our constitutional form of democracy. And I'm waiting for a legal opinion from Mr. Falcone as to that issue, as to our right to be heard, which I asked him in around September of 2020, and we never got an answer to that.
Thank you, Mr. Feld. Ms. Urso? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Morreale. Ms. Urso?
Okay, I just got the prompt.
Yep, you're here.
I appreciate my, the fellow members of the public trying to get my answers. You made it very simple. Mayor, you asked Mr. Preto and his opinion, and, I've been asking the same question when the overlays started for months and months. And today and tonight, just about 10 minutes ago, you all made it sound so easy. I'm not buying your answer. Why the B3 was kept out of the overlay. Now we understand, because of the intelligence of Mr. Kung, that the B4 was not even in the master plan of 2018. And I do recall Committeewoman Eglo that she was asking at the planning board meeting, why B3? Actually, she was trying to figure out the zone, but she knew the area. And there's still questions. And why would Beth McManus said she couldn't disclose that information? Mr. McDonald couldn't disclose that information. Now all of a sudden,
If it was so simple, exactly, Perry.
You're going to come out and disclose this information like it was like nothing. You made it sound so secretive. You couldn't tell us anything. So now I'm questioning. I don't buy it. And I think you need to ask your attorney to put his opinion in writing. And I also need you to ask this attorney if he feels I need a legal opinion if you have a conflict of interest. Because that's also been brought up tonight before you vote tonight. Again and again and again, 3-2-3-2. There's something else going on here. I'm not buying it. I don't buy your answer. There's something else about the B3. It just, you took a, it's just not right.
Thank you, Ms. Urso. Mr. Morreale.
Jay Morreale, 1 Claremont Drive. On the B4, if we wanted to remove one line, couldn't we vote no, remove one line, reintroduce it, and vote on it?
What line do you want to remove on B4?
Well, I wanted to remove it on B3,
They're not
but
gonna do
I
it.
was told it couldn't be done, so I want to know if we could do it on the B4.
No,
They're not gonna do it.
I know
No.
you're not going to do it, but technically, could it be done?
no, you said no.
You can't
No.
strike it and reintroduce it?
I don't think we're here to give hypothetical answers to hypothetical questions.
Well, legally,
You're
we
talking-
can. I mean, we've
Okay,
done
that's
that
fine.
before on ordinances. So yes, we
I think
can.
it just needs to be clear.
But
I
they're
think it-
not
That's all I
going to.
wanted to know,
Yeah.
because the answer I got was why we couldn't do it on the B3 is because we couldn't.
I think it needs to
I
be
think
clear
the
though.
answer is you didn't want to. And that's fine, but at least speak the truth, okay? And again, why you want mixed commercial and residential, you never did answer. You tried to throw it to Graham.
Hi, again, Mark Webb from 26 South Mountain Road. So, I'm getting confused. I'm hearing a lot of conflicting stuff, right? So the gentleman lawyer who's not Mr. Buzak.
definitely not
You,
Mr. Brewer.
No reason to hate me.
you said, I think a few minutes ago, that the negotiations went back and forth, right? So there was a negotiating process. Then I'm also hearing from some of the committee members who were present that there was no negotiation. They were told the deal that they had to accept. They were told the densities, the locations by fair share housing, and they had no choice. So, which was it? Was there a back and forth negotiation where, we were changing densities, or was it all set up from the get-go? In which case, why was it not done in one session? And then the other thing is, we're being told that fair share housing wanted to have the locations, the high density locations to be near stations, right? But then we're finding inconsistencies there, right? Because we have only 25 units per acre at the Milburn train station vicinity, right? Whereas we're having 40 or 69 at Annie Says, right, further away, and then 40 even further away in the block between Annie Says and Trader Joe's. We're also finding 0 units per acre down at Short Hills train station. So that doesn't seem to sort of fit together either. So maybe you could help me understand some of these inconsistencies. Thanks very much.
He doesn't really know anything because he's just a stand-in for our attorney anyway, no offense.
But Graham
I
could
think a few
actually
things,
help
and
with that.
I'd have to respond to that. I know a few things.
Yeah, but like not, you weren't part of the
No.
negotiation,
I
you
get- I
weren't
think-
in.
No, the first
He's a
thing, I have to address a
Stand
few
is
things.
not nice.
First off, none of that had to do with the B4, but getting past that. Expressions that fair share wanted something does not equate to fair share demanded and everybody exceeded. The reason for certain things being there is there are positions on both sides. So to say that in response to a question on how things went, that there is some density in a certain area because fair share wanted it, again, does not equate with fair share demanded it and Milburn conceded. Those things are not equal. That's a reason for it being there, and the exact amount was a subject of negotiation. Didn't happen. It was not, this didn't happen where fair share said, we want this, sign it, end of story. That was, I believe, a general explanation of why there was some density in certain places, and it shouldn't be then transferred that fair share demanded it. So I think you're mishearing when somebody says fair share had a desire. That's why things were negotiated a certain way in certain places. It does not mean that they just simply conceded to everything that was demanded.
Thank you.
Getting it back.
We have
But
somebody
wait,
on.
but Mr. Brewer, how do you know that's true? You weren't in the room.
Right. And the way I heard it was that fair share is saying it, like, we have to take it, we have to take it. So I heard something that you heard.
Yeah, and that's not it wasn't negotiated. You weren't there, Mr. Brewer, not to offend you, but you weren't there to know what, did they offer 80, then they got 40, they said take 15, no, we'll give you 20. Nobody knows that Maggie and Richard, and they're not talking.
Excuse me? Nope. Excuse me. Okay.
May I make a comment?
Yes,
Okay.
on B4.
I'd like to respond to what Ms.
On
Eglo
B4.
just said.
On B4.
About everything that everybody else got a chance to talk
B4.
about. Okay. I'm gonna just follow the rules, just like you do.
Thank
Okay? So what I understand from Mr. Wasserman, when he stood in this room with a group of us after a meeting, which I actually have taped because I had my phone on, so I have your words, so be careful, okay? You said your back was up against the wall. Did you not say that?
I may have said that. That's true.
You
That was
did.
true.
You said it very
Okay,
clearly.
that was true.
That things were imposed upon you
Our back
as a
was,
negotiating
no,
team
don't.
by Fair Share Housing. You said it. We have
our
it on
back
tape.
was against the wall because we had to sign a settlement agreement within 30 days. That was.
Can you move?
Oh, I wasn't allowed to.
Richard, would you like to move? Let's move.
Wait, I have another
Well, he's gonna
comment to
move
make.
and then you can.
Okay.
Right, go ahead. Say I move.
I move.
Oh, no, it's me, I guess.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
me.
you
It's
said,
me,
yeah,
I'm
we're
sorry.
all a little tired.
Okay, I move that this public hearing be closed and that the ordinance. Let's go, Mr. Carlin. It's on B4,
Before.
B4 and after.
Oh, yes, and it's before. And it's the question is, when we talk about due diligence concerning conflict of interest, and it's whether anyone within the Maggie Miggins Group real estate agents, Compass, they buy, sell, and rent smarter, whether anyone within the group, have you done due diligence with every member of your group to see if they have any particular conflict? Do you have any type of way of saying what type of conflicts that you may have in any particular way? Do you have a form of any type? Because I remember when I had to get involved with due diligence, you have an attorney as part of your group, you have a marketing director and so forth. And I'm just going by this whole thing of conflict of interest. People always bring that up because I've had that problem myself. So with that.
Before, Mr. Carlin.
And so forth. And that's what I'm saying.
Thank you.
For that.
Before.
Conflict of interest.
Okay.
Before, do they have any conflicts with before?
Right, thank
That's
you.
all.
Thank you, sir. Okay. I move that this public hearing be closed and the ordinance be adopted on final reading and that the township clerk be directed to publish the ordinance by title.
John Livingston.
Go ahead. Somebody new.
John Livingstone,
Sorry,
92
Mr.
Pine Street,
Livingston.
Melbourne. That's fine.
I
Yeah,
apologize.
So, no problem. So I caught the tail end of the planning board last week. And my impression is frankly that we're being swindled. And then as far as this meeting goes, frankly, given the fact that you have not done any studies on how it's going to impact the services that we must give our residents here in Millburn, schools, roads, inspections, on and on. You haven't quantified it. Shows to me that you and the rest of the other two people on the committee that are voting yes are kicking the can down the road. You're creating a disaster that may not be cleaned up. And hopefully we will be able to clean up once we either change your mind or vote you out of office. And maybe it'll be too late. That's the end of my comments. I'm really disappointed in this township committee. I'm just flabbergasted. And as far as conflict of interest, it sure seems to be a conflict given our mayor, Maggie, that you're a real estate agent. And we know that, you won't recuse yourself here, but will you say from this point on that your organization will step aside and not make one penny off any of these rentals? Are you willing to make that if you can't recuse yourself? And that's the end of what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Livingston. I move that this public hearing be closed and the ordinance be adopted on final reading and that the township clerk be directed to publish the ordinance by title as passed on final reading in accordance with law. May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote,
Wait,
please.
no, I have a comment to make that you said I can make as soon as you closed it. So Perry, I hope that you can hear me. I am like amazed at that. That is so true. We've been asking and everyone's been, oh, we can't talk about it. We can't talk about it. We can't tell you why the B3 wasn't in it. We can't tell you why the B3 wasn't in the settlement. And now you're all on like the same team. You're all like, oh, because of the master plan. I'm like, that's amazing because you guys came together. I wish I was involved in that meeting. We're like, okay, what are we going to say to them? Like, oh, it's the master plan. Because that is not what you've been saying this entire time. It's negotiation, can't talk about that, can't talk. That's such an easy answer that could have been shared with the public when they kept repeatedly asking over and over again why the B3 wasn't included. And so, as it's been said, I'm disappointed in all of you because it's clearly something's not adding up. And if that was the reason, you would have said it months ago.
But Tara, they couldn't have said it because the B4 is not in the master plan, so.
Right,
they
it doesn't make
couldn't-
any sense.
They couldn't have
It
done
doesn't
that.
make any
Thank
sense.
you.
It doesn't make any sense. People are lying here. You guys, yeah, saying that it wasn't included because it wasn't in the master plan is a lie. Or saying that we can't talk about it because it was all in confidence is lying. So somebody's lying here.
Roll call vote, please. Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Prupus,
No.
Deputy Mayor Thal Eglo,
No.
Mr. Vinayak,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserman,
Yes.
Mayor Miggins.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Thal Eglo, you are due to sponsor, let's see, the capital ordinance.
Okay, procedures for passing ordinance on final reading. I present for consideration an ordinance entitled
Yes.
ordinance number 2609-22. The capital ordinance of the Township of Milburn in the County of Essex, New Jersey, authorizing the making of various public improvements and acquisitions in buying for the township, appropriating therefore the sum of $2,150,000 and providing that sum so appropriated shall be raised from the capital improvement fund of the township. I think I read all of these last time, right? It was like fire stuff. It was like a lot of equipment, as I stated. Yeah, well, let me just say, yeah, okay, go ahead.
So I'll declare the hearing open.
And it was a lot of stuff that has to be purchased for the town, and I remember saying it's very expensive to run the town. But I don't have the list. Right, so-
I just,
Oh, here it is.
we're at 2609-2022.
Oh, wait, Mr. Feld, I'm sorry, I want to say.
All right.
Fire department, a vehicle, Department of Public Works, a vehicle, repair replacement of sewer lines at locations, police department, $190,000, apparatus and equipment, recreation, $30,000, general improvements, undertaking buildings, installation of pedestrian safety and street signs at various locations, engineering, $730,000, engineering, $30,000. I mean, there's just a lot of things here. A lot of engineering, apparatus, equipments.
I appreciate that. Again, Jeffrey Feld, 11 Alexander Lane. My questions are partly to explain the differences between the capital ordinance and the bond ordinance is about to come down. A few down below. And first,
Pardon me?
We have Matt Laris here, CFO that could explain.
all right.
Would you like that, Mr. Feld, to have our CFO explain it to you?
No. Let me ask my explanation and then you can come explain it. First of all, I want to tell the community, I want to thank this year with our new CFO. We had a great presentation as to the budget, that there is a presentation with slides, and he had a special hearing like a week later. And I want to understand the distinction between a capital ordinance and a bond ordinance, because I think the public needs to know this, because it might impact things that happened last year that might not have been done properly. That when we adopted the budget this year, we had allocations for monies to go into a capital account. And I think I just want to clarify that the purpose of this capital ordinance is saying, even though we appropriated monies in our budget process, this is just like a document to showing us that we're authorizing the release of those monies to be used for purposes that we originally identified when we did the budget. Because when you had your presentation, like you said, you're gonna put like $2.5 million into your capital account. You said it was like for the fire trucks, all the different things. The reason I'm just saying that is that when you go, I'm getting down a little ahead of the game, when we do the bond ordinance, there's two things that happen that are different. You're amending your capital budget to allow those other obligations, and you're going to issue debt to pay for this. Where the capital ordinance, you're really not issuing debt. You said, because when we approved the budget, we put X dollars into a special account. And this is just authorizing us to take it from that account to use those purposes that we did in the appropriation. I just want to clarify why we're doing something by a capital ordinance versus a bond ordinance, because this has implications about the case that you paid the retainer today for the attorney that you never retained. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if we should even answer that.
Okay, no, okay, so is there anyone else that has any other questions about this ordinance, 2609-22? Someone online? Go ahead.
Hi, good evening. Perry Urso, 514 Milburn Avenue in Short Hills. So in my public comment, I mentioned about the local cable channel. So I'm wondering if it's possible that 1% of this sum could be allocated, which would be 21,000 to Hometown TV that had given a proposal to start broadcasting again. And maybe if we hire these professionals, we won't have the problems like we ran into tonight that coincidentally I emailed you all earlier today, trying to prevent this from happening. I mean, you guys are talking millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars of things that we need. Why does this body feel that we do not need the local channel? If you prove me wrong, put it up. See what the ratings are. I mean, I'm sure there must be some type of tracking, but that wasn't the question I asked. Yes, I wanted to know how much franchise, which this money goes into the capital fund of franchise fees. Yes, I did ask for the 2020 number, Alex, but I also asked why this body refuses to use the local access channel to broadcast our meetings. That was my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I move that this public hearing be closed and the ordinance be adopted on final reading, and the township clerk be directed to publish the ordinance by title as passed on final reading in accordance with law.
May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Prupus,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Thought Eglo,
Yes.
Mr. Vinayak,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserman,
Yes.
Mayor Miggins.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. Ordinance 2610.
I'm sorry,
Yep,
can I just interrupt?
You may.
I wanna just, two things. One is I just wanted to make a comment that Mr. Feld indicated that our answers to his question will directly impact a litigation that he's involved in with the township. Therefore, we're not gonna answer that question. I
okay,
think that's fair.
that's fair.
Ms. Urso's question about whether we could take 1% of that the capital ordinance
Yep.
and allocate it towards the cable franchise, that is not possible. Capital ordinances are only to be able to be used for capital items, which include something that has a 5-year useful life at least. And it costs over $5,000, which I would qualify, but it has to have a 5-year useful life. There's a statute on it.
Okay, thank you very much. Ordinance 261022, Ms. Thal-Egler, you were scheduled to sponsor.
I would like to present an ordinance entitled 2620-22, an ordinance amending and supplementing chapter 7 traffic, section 7-20 stop intersections on the revised general ordinances of the Township of Millburn. The proposed amendment to the traffic ordinance is to authorize the installation of an all-way stop sign at the intersection of Myrtle Avenue and Elm Street.
No.
No?
Nope.
Myrtle Avenue and Elm Street, am I not reading it right?
You have the one.
You are on
Parking
a
lot
first
14.
reading.
You jumped ahead. This is a ridiculous meeting that says 12:44 at night and we're doing this town business. This is like absurd.
Okay.
It should be, I make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Like what needs to happen tonight going forward with all this?
You would carry these last two?
Like, I'm making a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Wait, can we carry, only if we can carry
we-
these last two about.
Can we carry these? This is ridiculous.
Let's keep going.
Okay, these are the last two for tonight.
Go.
What's the last two for the night?
These, the one I was gonna give you.
No, it's
No,
not.
it's not.
No.
Look at this whole page. This is ridiculous. It's 12:45 in the morning.
Last time we were here till 1:30. We're almost finished.
No, we're not almost finished, Maggie.
Two.
Made the motion.
I did.
All right, then I'll second it. I
Great.
second it.
Roll call vote to adjourn the meeting.
Roll call vote, please.
Christine's sleeping.
You're waking me up. Hold on.
I got you, Christine. I got you. All right.
Ms. Prupus,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Thal Eglo,
Yes.
Mr. Vinayak,
No.
Mr. Wasserman.
Right, he's home. Exactly.
Excuse me.
Yeah,
Sorry,
Ms. Krupus, I'm
Mr.
not home.
Wasserman?
Some
No.
people have to work as well.
No.
Are you kidding me? Sanjeev, some people have to work as well? What, are you
I'm
kidding
at
me?
work.
Excuse me.
Can we keep going?
Excuse me.
Wow.
Excuse me.
I didn't
Mayor
know that I
Miggins?
owned a business
No.
in town.
You know what, Tara, they have their 3 votes. Is there anything we're
Oh, yeah.
to? We can
No.
go home.
Oh, good.
I think that's extremely unfair.
Unfair to what?
Fair?
These are bond ordinances that are helping in the operation and infrastructure of this town that require a 4th vote.
Oh, let's hit, we could do it. Look, we can carry the rest. This is ridiculous.
So, did you declare the hearing open? Okay, so yours gonna be.
$1.5 million.
Can we join them together? Can we do like a consent of all of them? Why? They're gonna vote it anyway. It's fine. It's just ridiculous. It's 12:46.
All right, capital ordinance 260922.
Where are we?
Where are we exactly?
I believe we're on ordinance 261022.
Okay, ordinance 2610-22. Capital ordinance of the Township of Milburn authorizing the undertaking of various improvements to parking lot 14, which is important, in, by and for the parking utility in the township appropriating therefore the sum of $400,000 and providing that such sum so appropriate as to be raised from the public utility capital improvement fund.
Tonight is the time set for the public hearing and final passage as advertised in accordance with the law. I declare the hearing open.
My name is Jeffrey Feld, 11 Alexander Lane. I still like an answer, the difference between a capital ordinance and a bond ordinance for this year. That has nothing to do. You're doing an action this year. Can you explain to the public?
Mr.
why
Feld,
you're
we are
doing-
discussing 2610-22,
Yeah,
which
that's
is
a
lot
capital-
14
That's a capital ordinance about lot 14.
specifically.
Yeah, so I'm asking you why you do something in a capital ordinance versus a bond ordinance. And you refuse to answer the question because it might implicate litigation.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Urso? Bring her on, please.
Good evening, Perry Urso, 514 Milburn Avenue.
Good evening.
So regarding this resolution and ordinance during the first reading, we were told that we would be contacted at the request of Mayor Miggins and Ms. Prupus. However, we were never contacted. We have property within the surrounding perimeter of Lot 14. Why is the township continually avoided us personally? Has anyone contacted or spoken to other property owners or business owners regarding Lot 14? Have any of their concerns or ideas been considered or addressed? Can you please answer the questions prior to your vote? Thank you.
Could you tell me why we're using a capital ordinance rather than a bond ordinance?
I will answer both those questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
One is a capital ordinance. If I would just put it in sort of simple terms, the capital ordinance is cash, a bond ordinance is debt. You can take out debt either through a bond anticipation note or through a long-term note, 20 to 30 years. That would result in a bond ordinance. To answer Ms. Urso's question, we haven't even started the process yet. This is the allocation of the funds to be able to start that process.
Okay, thank you. Move. Do you want to close it? Move.
I move that this ordinance be taken up and passed on first reading and the township clerk be authorized at the second reading.
Oh my God, I'm out. I'm leaving. I think this is ridiculous.
But that's not fair if you leave.
Why?
I have
You can't even read, no offense. Like right now, you can't even get words out, Diane. This is not.
But
this is
wait,
like-
wait, Carrie, one second. Wait, I want to say one thing.
Oh,
Alex.
okay.
Sorry.
Just
Well,
Where's Canoe? Oh, I can zoom in. I can zoom in. I gotta go to the shop. I gotta go start working. Right now, I gotta work at 12:45 at night.
May I have a second? May I have a second?
Second,
Roll call vote, please.
Where's the Canoe Brook one?
where is it?
Ms.
Oh.
Prupus?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Phil Eglo?
Yes.
Mr. Vinayak?
Yes.
Mr. Wasserman?
Yes,
Mayor Miggins?
Yes, ordinance 261122. Mr. Rossman, you're scheduled to sponsor procedure.
Oh, wait, I want to make a motion to move that we vote right now on 2619-22. No, just kidding. 2620, yeah, that one, the Canoe Brook. I want to make that motion that we pull that up. Diane, will you
Okay,
second that?
Sure, second, but I want to go home too. This is all crazy.
Roll
Roll
call
call
vote,
vote to
please.
move that motion up to the top.
Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Prupus,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Thought Eglo,
Yes.
Mr. Vinayak,
No,
Mr. Wasserman,
Because you, right, like you can't do that. You can't just bring it up to the top.
I would prefer it to keep it the way it is.
Why?
Excuse me,
You
excuse
can
me.
sit in your comfortable chair
Excuse me.
at home or wherever you are.
Excuse me,
Am I
we're in the
asking
middle of a
question
roll call
on your
vote,
vote?
please.
No.
What, why? Why, Richard?
Because we have to do the business of the town. That's why.
That is the business of the town. That's the most important thing right here, right now. Unreal. Do you, can
I'm
you say
here,
anything else?
I'm here also.
You could leave.
You can leave
Miss-
also.
I
The
want
door's
Miss-
there. Go ahead.
Ms. Gaddy, do you want to finish the roll call, please?
Unreal.
Mayor Megan.
Who are you?
No.
Thank you.
Mr. Wasserman, you're scheduled to sponsor 2611-22.
Thank you. Ordinance number 2611-22, bond ordinance to authorize the making of various public improvements in, by, and for the Township of Millburn in the County of Essex, State of New Jersey, to appropriate the sum of $690,000 to pay the cost thereof, to make a down payment, to authorize the issuance of bonds, to finance such appropriation, and to provide for the issuance of bond anticipation notes in anticipation of the issuance of such bonds. Tonight is the time set for the public hearing and a final passage as advertised in accordance with the law.
I declare the hearing open.
Good evening, Jeffrey Feld, 11 Alexander Lane. Regarding 2611-22 and 2612-22, can someone tell me why the supplemental debt statements were not attached to the bond ordinances? Mr. Wasserman, you nominated.
Mr.
Why weren't they attached?
What? Excuse.
No, a question, you show that you filed it, but why isn't it attached to the bond ordinance? Because that's a prerequisite that anyone that took municipal law 101 would know when you do bond ordinances, you need a supplemental debt statement.
Because none of
Why
us
isn't it
took
posted on
municipal
our
law
website?
101.
And why isn't it posted on our public website?
Want to answer that? Matt can answer. it. Mr. Clarsey, are you on? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so the only, the supplemental debt statement does not need to be posted on the website or attached to the ordinance. It is, all that information is included in the annual debt statement at the end of the year. And the supplemental debt statement is a public document. It's something that, you know, very well could be asked for or Oprah'd or included really anywhere that we would like to include it. It's just not, you know, part of the regular process that municipalities undertake.
Sir, with all due respect, supplemental debt statements are posted on our website for other years. Why wasn't it done this one? You're new, please be careful. Please be careful.
Please, okay.
So, Mr. Larcy, what would it take to put that along with the paperwork?
It's not a big deal at all. It's something that we have to show to the bond council that's published and something that the auditors look for and the state looks for. So, you know, it's just, we're fulfilling our obligations, certainly. If we want it somewhere else, that's our prerogative. And if it's requested as a public document, then we'll always supply it.
If it's not a hassle, I would be all for attaching it to the package.
Certainly.
Thank you. I mean, if you.
Wow,
want
is
to
that
hear from other
simple?
people,
Like,
then-
And Jeff,
Sanjeev says, let's do it. And then it's like, okay, done.
And Jeff, you didn't even get the
Amazing.
primary, you're getting all this stuff done.
Amazing.
Wow.
Richard?
I lost the point.
That's why I said you
Yeah.
didn't even win.
Hold on.
I said you didn't
Hold on.
even win.
All I'm gonna ask is that several times
But
to
you're still
staff,
bossing a lot
Yeah.
of people
Mr.
around.
Feld,
Excuse me.
several times to staff, Mr. Feld, both in meetings and outside of meetings, continues to tell everyone to be careful.
Right.
Yeah.
That can be construed as a veiled threat to employees about what he thinks that we are doing. And I would just really appreciate it as we all go through these stressful times, including our residents, including the committee and everybody that's here as a staff member, that Mr. Feld tone down that rhetoric, but
Yeah.
be careful.
Okay, thank you very
I
much.
move that this public hearing be closed and the ordinance be adopted on final reading, and the township clerk be directed to publish the ordinance by title as passed on the final reading in accordance with the law.
May I have a second?
Second,
Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Prupus,
What are we voting on again?
Bond
The
ordinance.
bond ordinance for,
261122.
Yes, good, I'm in.
Deputy Mayor Thal Eglo,
Sure.
Mr. Vinayak,
yes,
Mr. Wasserman,
Yes,
Mayor Miggins,
yes. Thank you. Ordinance 2612-22. I present for ordinance 2612-22, a bond ordinance to authorize the undertaking of township-wide security improvements in, by, and for the Township of Milburn and the County of Essex, State of New Jersey, to appropriate the sum of
and Chief
1.5 million to pay the cost thereof, to make a down payment, to authorize the issuance of bonds, to finance such appropriation, and to provide for the issuance of bond anticipation notes in anticipation of the issuance of such bonds. Tonight is the time set for public hearing and final passage as advertised in accordance with the law. I declare the hearing open. I move that this public hearing be closed and the ordinance be adopted on final reading, and that the township clerk be directed to publish the ordinance by title as passed on final reading in accordance with the law. May I please have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Prupus,
Yes,
Deputy Mayor Thal Eglo,
Yes.
Mr. Vinayak,
yes,
Mr. Wasserman,
yes,
Mayor Miggins,
Yes. Thank you. Ordinance 2613-22. Mr. Vinayak is scheduled to sponsor.
I present for consideration an ordinance entitled Ordinance Number 2613-22. Ordinance amending and supplementing the Township of Milburn Development Regulation and Zoning Ordinance. Tonight is the time set for public hearing and final passage as advertised in accordance with law. I would like to make a motion in order to propose some technical amendments to Ordinance 2613-22. The amended ordinance with the revisions have been made available to the public and committee. The technical amendments are as follows: correcting the numbering of the definitions sequentially from 300 to 301, under section 301.43.0 titled patio, removing the word impervious, and it shall now read a level hardscaped surface area, also referred to as a terrace, under section 609.1.g. Add the word also to the third line, and it shall now read principal building, and as such shall also comply with the bulk requirements.
To ask for a second for amendments.
second,
Okay. Can I have a roll call vote for the amendments?
Ms. Prupus,
no,
Deputy Mayor Thal Eglo,
No.
Mr. Vinayak,
Yes,
Mr. Wasserman,
yes,
Mayor Miggins,
Yes.
thank you.
I declare the hearing open on the amended ordinance. Go ahead, Sanjeev.
I move that this public hearing be closed and the ordinance be adopted on final reading as amended, and that the township clerk be directed to publish the ordinance by title as passed on final reading in accordance with law.
May I please have a second?
second,
Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Prupus,
no,
Deputy Mayor Thal Eglo,
No.
Mr. Vinayak,
Yes,
Mr. Wasserman,
yes,
Mayor Miggins,
Yes. Thank you. Ordinance 2614-22, which is an ordinance authorizing the execution of a lease agreement between the township and the Cora Hartshorn Arboretum and Bird Sanctuary. The purpose of this ordinance is the execution of a lease between the township and the Cora Hartshorn Arboretum and Bird Sanctuary, who is responsible for running programs and services in accordance with the will of Cora Hartshorn, who bequeathed the land to the township of Milburn. Tonight is the time set for the public hearing and final passage as advertised in accordance with law. I declare the hearing open. I move that this public hearing be closed and the ordinance be adopted on final reading, and that the township clerk be directed to publish the ordinance by title as passed on final reading in accordance with law. May I please have a second?
second,
Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Prupus,
no,
Deputy Mayor Thal Eglo,
Yes.
Mr. Vinayak,
yes,
Mr. Wasserman,
yes,
Mayor Miggins,
Yes. Thank you. Mr. Vinayak, you are scheduled to sponsor ordinance 2615-22.
I present for consideration an ordinance entitled ordinance number 2615-22. Ordinance authorizing and encouraging electric vehicle supply, service equipment, EVSE, and make-ready parking spaces. Tonight is a time set for the public hearing and final passage as advertised in accordance with law. I would like to make a motion for a technical amendment to ordinance 2615-22, section 1 shall be amended as follows. Reference to section 607.2 in section 1 is amended to 607.6.
May I please have a second for the amendment?
Second.
May I have a roll call vote for the amendment?
Maybe we should just say what the amendment is.
Yeah, like what are we
Yeah,
even
yeah.
like? Does anyone even know what we're talking about?
Yeah, why did we amend?
Does
it by
anyone know what we're
number?
talking about?
Well, I know the EV this is like part of New
I
Jersey
can chime
law.
in.
Is that Graham's?
If you'd like, I
already?
can.
Graham's on there.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Graham.
Yeah. So the amendment that is presented is just to adjust the numbering to ensure that we don't number over another section in the ordinance. When we drafted the ordinance, we just wanted to make sure that it fit appropriately within and numbered sequentially. So we've just adjusted the number to 607.6, so it fits sequentially within the ordinance.
And can you just give a brief description of what?
Sure,
the
brief
ordinances
description
were?
of the ordinance. Sure, absolutely. So essentially, the state adopted state regulations that stipulate percentage of parking at certain development sites needs to be allocated to electric vehicle charging facilities. It is now a state requirement of all new development applications across the state, regardless of local regulations. The state allows for local municipalities to codify the state regulations within to their local municipal code. So that's what this ordinance here does. And this will now insert the requirements that have been codified, as I said, by the state into the local Millburn code, which is better for reference by local developers that come into the community and are doing site improvements or other parking lot improvements to ensure that electric vehicle charging facilities are developed on site pursuant to the state law.
So it's not necessary. It's just kind of making it easier for the developers to come in and know what the code is. Is that correct?
It's increased transparency for the planning board, for members of the public, for developers as well, and other property owners within the township to be understanding of the requirements at a local level. It can be difficult to cite state requirements or codes when you're doing a local review process or implementing a local review. It's better to have that locally codified, so it's more transparent for all parties involved.
Got it. Thanks.
And I just want to add that this was unanimously decided by the planning board that it was not inconsistent. So,
Oh, great.
yeah, now we like the plan. We're gonna follow
Yeah.
their lead.
Good. Got it. I feel much better now.
Yeah, I know.
I think we are still asking for amendment first, right?
Right, right. Chairman to ask for roll call for votes on the amendment. Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Prupus,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Thol Eglo,
Yes.
Mr. Vinayak,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserman,
Yes.
Mayor Miggins.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I declare the hearing open on the amended ordinance.
So I think, let me just make sure I have this right. 6I says a 24-hour on-call contact shall be provided on the equipment for reporting problems with the equipment or access to it. I've heard that there already exists an EVSE in the Millburn train station parking lot, which has been broken for quite some time now. So maybe we ought to look into this before we promise to have 24-hour on-call contact related to that. There's another one. Publicly accessible EVSE shall have posted regulatory signs as identified in this section. If time limits or vehicle removal provisions are to be enforced, regulatory signs, including parking restrictions, shall be installed immediately adjacent to. Who's going to be enforcing this? I think there's a lot of questions here, and I don't know whether or not we ought to be pushing this through in the dead of night. Thank you.
To underline what you just said, Jerry, just given that we had a restaurant in town for what, 2 years? That was illegal. It took 2 years to finally get enforcement and get that out of here. I think he has a very legitimate point.
Mark with South Mountain Road 26. I do have an EV. If you are going to put a charger in there, can you make it a fast one rather than one which we have to charge for like 20 hours?
A supercharger?
Sounds like that's affirmative.
Okay, go ahead, Sanjeev.
I move this public hearing be closed and the ordinance be adopted on final reading as amended, and that the township clerk be directed to publish the ordinance by title as passed on final reading in accordance with law.
May I have a second, please?
Second,
Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Prupus?
I feel really uncomfortable voting at this hour, so I'm gonna abstain.
Deputy Mayor Thal Eglo?
I like that. I'll abstain. 'Cause I can't pass.
Pass.
you're not allowed to pass.
Mr. Vinayak?
Yes.
Mr. Wasserman?
Yes.
Mayor Miggins?
Yes, thank you. Ordinance 261722, Mr. Wasserman, you're scheduled to sponsor.
Thank you, Mayor. I present for consideration an ordinance entitled Ordinance Number 2617-22, ordinance amending the supplementing the Township of Milburn Development regulations and zoning ordinance. Tonight is the time set for public hearing and final passage as advertised in accordance with the law. I declare the hearing open.
I think you need to tell what this one is.
Yeah, Alex.
Graham, do you want to talk
Okay.
to what the buffer zones are about, please?
Happy to share. So
Thank you.
this is an existing section within the zoning ordinance, the buffer requirements. This section has been amended and expanded to include buffer requirement for multifamily housing developments, given the proposed, the earlier ordinances considered by the Township Committee. The requirements, are modified to increase the size of buffers, increase planting heights, and also stipulate plantings adjacent to residential properties on the opposite side of any fencing or screening, and also to expand, as I mentioned, to require buffer from any multifamily housing developments that are adjacent to any single or two-family dwelling, regardless of zone within which that property is located.
Mr. Moriarty?
Jay Morelli, 1 Claremont Drive. I'm generally in favor of this. I think it's an improvement to the existing buffer area. The only comment is, the last time I read it, the eventual height of any trees planted was to be 20 feet. And I really think it should be whatever the size of the building is. So if you've got a 4-story building on the other side, the maturity height of any buffer in between should be the height of the building. But in general, it's an improvement over our existing buffer.
Thank you.
Also a question, who would be responsible for the care and upkeep of that buffer?
Who's going to enforce this? Again, enforcement, compliance. We have 1.5 enforcement personnel. We do CRs and rules and regulations, but people don't go out there. And I spoke to Joe and I explained that he has jurisdiction to enforce. And it says, what jurisdiction? And I'm explaining this to him as he goes, a very nice gentleman on the fire department.
Thank you so much.
Alex, could you clarify who does the enforcement?
Well, first of all, I mean, it's site plan or zoning board approval, so they'll make sure that it's complied with in those applications.
In the applications, okay.
And then when it comes to the construction of that and whether it's adhered to, would be the construction office as well as code enforcement.
Okay.
Wait, so I have a question after you do a second. You know, my question now, just, okay. So when they put in across from St. Rose, I can't remember the name of that development now. Enclave. They have trees, so you don't see the houses from Milburn Avenue. So now, Andy says it's gonna get built, but I remember when I was part of the Old Saks property, you and I were in a room with them, Alex, we said, you gotta put trees, like we were able to keep that 20-foot, whatever that, wherever the grass is. gonna put trees there, trees, trees, trees. This is only about buffers behind, so it doesn't affect Jay's backyard or somebody else's backyard. What happens when Annie says it's built? Can we force them to put trees in the front so we don't just see this massive brick building? Is that part of the buffer? The front, Graham? I guess I should ask you. What's the protection to beautify Milburn Avenue with shade trees when all of these enormous buildings of solid brick walls go up and destroy the view of the South Mountain Reservation, by the way, for all of South Mountain section?
To answer your question related to the ordinance before you for consideration, the requirement for the buffer is at the rear or adjacent or side, any adjoining property line with the residential use. So it could be side or rear. Typically, there's not an adjoining property at a front property line.
Well, but why are we not adding to protection of the front? Why are we not protecting Milburn Avenue from a looming 4-story building, which it's gonna be there? And Annie says might be 5 stories. Why are we not protecting the front and demanding shade trees along the avenue on any building being built? This is not ready for publication.
I think you'd have to review the ordinance that's already been passed on the Annie Says property.
I think we should review this. A buffer, you're protecting people's backyards and side yards. Let's protect the front of Milburn Avenue. I say this is not ready for prime time. It's not ready. It's not fair. You can protect Jay's backyard. I'm sorry, Jay, but you can't protect the entire South Mountain neighborhood frontage when they're gonna come out of Undercliff Road, South Mountain Road, what's the other road? Wyoming.
Parkview.
Parkview, yeah. So why, I'm sorry, you can't just protect people's side yards and backyards. You're destroying Milburn Avenue, Maggie, Sanjeev, and Richard. You have destroyed this town.
Richard, you wanna?
Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
move that this public hearing be closed and the ordinance be adopted on final reading, and that the township clerk be directed to publish the ordinance by title as passed on final reading in accordance with the law.
May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Prupus?
No.
Deputy Mayor Thought-Eglow?
No.
Mr. Vinayak?
Yes.
Mr. Wasserman?
Yes.
Mayor Miggins?
Yes. Thank you. Ms. Prupus,
I
you were.
present for consideration an ordinance entitled ordinance number 2618-22, bond ordinance providing for the township's allocable share of the flood mitigation facilities project phase 3 of the joint meeting of Essex and Union counties by and for the township of Milburn in the county of Essex, state of New Jersey, appropriating 200,400.
No.
2 million? No. 2,445,000, therefore, and authorizing the issuance of 2,445,000 bonds or notes to finance the cost thereof. Today is the time to sit for the public hearing and final passage as advertised in accordance with the law.
I declare the hearing open.
Well, it's Mark Webb from 26 South Mountain Road. I don't know whether any of this 2,445,000 will get spent on South Mountain. I hope there's something good to come to South Mountain tonight. But you know, I mean, when I came to South Mountain Road, I was kind of surprised when we have heavy rainstorms just to see like our trash cans at this trash day just sort of marching down the road. And the reason is we have no storm drains if going down from South Mountain Road top to bottom, right? We have storm drains at the very top and storm drains at the very bottom, but the water sort of picks up steam as it sort of comes down, and also all new houses that are built are forced to just have dry wells, right? And because we've got clay soil, it fills up like a cup and then sort of spills over everywhere and down the street, causing flooding lower down in all of these flood areas, sort of lower down in South Mountain. And, you know, if we could only have as good infrastructure as we have in the next door street in Undercliff, where there is a storm drain all the way down, and you know we got Belgian curved blocks there. I mean, it looks great, right? But if we could even just get the drainage right in all of these streets, I think that it would help safely redirect the water before it builds up and gets all the way down to the lower parts. So I hope you consider putting some money into storm drains and allowing us to link our houses straight into the storm drains for our sump pumps rather than, you know, having to put it in dry wells.
Thank you.
I think the flood
So-
mitigation committee.
So,
I was gonna mention that. I would say join us tomorrow morning at 8:30 for flood mitigation. We have a public session. I hopefully will have a different suit on.
Why does he have to be there? Just take care of it. Talk to Martha in engineering.
But
We've
you
already
should,
done that.
you could come tomorrow, if you want to zoom in.
so this money is not for the town, it's for the
Yeah.
sewage treatment, which is the, and their facilities.
The joint
for,
meeting.
Stormwater management and flooding, so it's not gonna be applicable to this town. I know, I'm so sorry,
But I
but
think you should write
you
to
bring a really good
Martha
point,
in
for sure.
engineering on the SDL portal. I mean, I didn't know you don't have proper.
Mr. Webb and I had a conversation
Oh.
when they paved the road. So,
Good.
yeah, I'm aware of the situation. We've discussed it with engineering about the drainage.
Excellent.
that would be awesome. All right, I move that this public hearing be closed and the ordinance be adopted on a final reading and the township clerk be directed to publish ordinance by title and pass on final reading in accordance with the law.
May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Prupus,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Thought Eglo,
Yes.
Mr. Vinayak,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserman,
Yes.
Mayor Miggins,
Yes. Resolution 22-185, award professional service agreement, engineering services for design services, construction management, and inspection services related to parking lot number 14 reconstruction, Neglia Engineering Associates. Are there any comments from the committee in regards to resolution 22-185?
I just have one, Alex, you were gonna go talk to Perry or so about lot 14.
Yeah, this engineering firm will help us in that process as well. But yes, we're gonna talk to the property owners over there because we're gonna talk about lighting and.
Great, but
parking lot.
specifically, you're gonna talk to Perry about this.
We're gonna talk to the property owners over there.
But
All-
Perry is a
She's-
property owner, so
Exactly, so we
specifically,
will
you will
talk-
include Perry
Of
in the
course, she's a
conversation.
property owner.
Awesome, thank you.
Anyone else? May I have a motion to approve resolution 22-185?
So.
I think Perry has a question there.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Sanjeev. Did you say you have a question?
No, I think Perry has a question.
This is not.
It's
No,
not
this
time.
isn't, this isn't the
Oh,
time.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. May I have a motion to approve resolution 22-185?
Motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Prupus,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Thought Eglo,
Yes.
Mr. Vinayak,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserman,
Yes.
Mayor Miggins.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Vinayak, you're to introduce ordinance 2619-22.
Sure, Mayor. I would like to present an ordinance entitled ordinance number 2619-22. Ordinance amending and supplementing the Township of Milburn Development Regulations and zoning ordinance. Mr. McDonald or Mr. Petto, do you want to explain?
This is 2619-22, correct?
That's right.
Yes. So this is the overlay zone for the Canoe Country Club property,
Okay,
which incorporates a development yield not to exceed 8 dwelling units per acre per the settlement agreement, term number 9.
Which will never be built.
That's right.
I move that this ordinance be taken up and passed on first reading, and that the township clerk be authorized to have the ordinance published in accordance with law in the item and for hearing and final passage on Tuesday, August 16, 2022.
This is the first reading.
This first one. All right.
Yeah, this is just an introduction.
So do I ask for a second in Maggie's behalf? May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call, please. Roll call vote.
Ms. Prupus,
No.
Deputy Mayor Thought Eglo,
No.
Mr. Vinayak,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserman,
Yes.
and I note Mayor Miggins is absent.
She's recused.
Recused. Yeah, recused.
He's recused, and yeah, she's not in the room, so.
Okay, lastly, this is the last one, folks.
Yeah.
I'd like to present an ordinance entitled ordinance 2620-22. Ordinance amending and supplementing chapter 7, traffic section 7-20, stop intersections of the revised general ordinance in the Township of Milburn. The proposed amendment to the traffic ordinance to authorize the installation of all-way stop signs at the intersections of Myrtle Avenue and Elm Street. Office. Always Stop Signs has been recommended by the Township of Milton Traffic Bureau, Engineering Department, Pedestrian Safety Advisory Board, and on-call traffic engineer, Brightview Engineering, due to their close proximity to Wyoming School and to further control traffic and pedestrian mobility in the area. I move that this ordinance be taken up and passed on first reading. The Township Clerk be authorized that the ordinance published in accordance with the law and item and for hearing and final passage on Tuesday, August 16, 2022.
May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Prupus,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Joel Eglo,
Yes.
Mr. Vinayak,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserman,
Yes.
Mayor Megan.
Yes. Reports, we can now consider reports.
I move to adjourn.
Yeah, I moved in second. Motion second, right? That's all in favor, right?
What was the motion?
She said to motion to
To
adjourn.
adjourn.
Oh, I'm seconding it.
Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Prupus,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Joel Eglo,
Yes.
Mr. Vinayak,
Yes.
Yes.
Wasserman,
That's it. Yeah, he just said yes. It's over. That's it.
Mr. Wasserman, excuse me,
I was gonna say yes also.
You were gonna say yes?
Mayor Megan.
We're such a family now. We're like one big happy group.